Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Good afternoon. Good to be here again. In India, where diversity thrives but dissent is often stifled, the press embodies the courage to question power, uncover truths, and amplify the marginalized. Yet, this vital institution is under siege. It is facing censorship, corporate influence, and even violence. As the Indian society reels between progress and polarization, the role of journalism has never been more crucial. It is not just a profession, if you see, it is democracy's heartbeat. Unfortunately, one more heartbeat has fallen silent from the deep jungles of Bastar in Chhatisgargh. Mukesh Chandrakar, he was a journalist, independent freelance journalist based in Bastar, and he had exemplified the role of journalism in giving voice to the voiceless. His ground reporting bridged the gap between the government and the Naxalite movement and has bravely shed light on the grievances on tribal communities and advocating their rights. So Chandrakar's investigative work subsequently exposed a scam in road construction where the contract escalated from 50 crore rupees to 120 crore rupees without any change in scope. And this fearless reporting brought accountability to an issue that could have remained unchecked. But then, sadly, he lost his life because he was killed by the very people who were involved in this corruption. There are serious challenges journalism is facing in India because the Indian authorities of late and those in power have increasingly targeted journalists and online critics for their dissent. And they have been employing methods and tools of sedition and counter-terrorism and those laws to silence the voices of journalists. Since 2017 in Uttar Pradesh, criminal cases have been filed against at least 66 journalists and another 48 have faced physical attacks. And such actions are just eroding the foundational principles of democracy in Uttar Pradesh. Journalists in Jammu and Kashmir have faced intensified threats since the abrogation of state's special status 370, which happened in 2019. So the internet is down and there are physical raids and interrogation and many a times confiscation of devices of the journalist has only led to curtailing freedom of press in the region. It's a democracy in Jammu and Kashmir. But then, with more than 35 journalists have faced police action, and it is making it increasingly difficult for them to operate in Jammu and Kashmir. So the rest of the country do not know what exactly is going on in Jammu and Kashmir. I do understand it is a sensitive issue of national security, but then rest of the country has the right to know how the government is solving the problem of national security in Jammu and Kashmir. Of lately, we have also seen the misuse of laws such as sedition and defamation, along with advanced surveillance tools like Pegasus spyware, and that has raised serious concerns about the journalist safety and their profession. Now, this is the latest instance I would like to share, and don't laugh at it, and that is the arrest of Mohammad Zubair. He is the co-founder of Alt News, and this Alt News group, the freelance group, is doing an excellent work in fact-checking and stopping fake news in the current times of politics in India. In that attempt, Zubair retweeted an instance of hate speech as an evidence, and when he retweeted, he actually tagged UP police asking for some action, asking as if the UP police, do they know what's going on? Now, Mohammad Zubair got arrested because the UP police is now accusing Zubair of retweeting hate speech and attempting to disturb communal harmony. While the person who is of interest, the person who is really making the hate speech, Narsingh Anand, he is scot-free. So that is the state of journalism, the voice of dissent being treated in India. Now, these kind of instances only underscores the increasing legal harassment and the legal terrorism that is faced by the independent journalists and the fact checkers and the freelance journalists who want to undertake the issues of society. One of the strong voices against the policies of government, Rana Ayub. You would have heard her name. Now, she was stopped from traveling to United Kingdom because she was to speak at a journalism event, and she was charged for tax evasion and money laundering and etc. and everything. And this is 3 years ago, and still nothing has happened as far as the legal thing is concerned. But then it is only a tool and method to harass those who have a voice of dissent against the government. So what does this picture actually mean? This means that the government, which grows more on authoritarianism, they start to clamp down harder on press freedoms, and they muscle the press with fears and scrutiny. And these trends increase as the government becomes more authoritarian. So why do governments fear journalists? Because journalism, a good journalism, threatens authoritarian regimes, and they expose misconducts, and it provides an alternative narrative to what the government is saying. It creates a sense of accountability in the society. The inefficiencies are highlighted, and of course, by exposing corruption and inefficiencies, the political careers are at stake. Also, the government starts to lose its propaganda, its narrative, and the state fears that too much discontent might give rise to social unrest. But then, India has a standing on press freedom. Out of 180 countries surveyed in 2024, the latest World Press Freedom Index, India stands at 159. So which means that as a democracy, as a functioning democracy, India cannot have a worse ranking than what we have today as 159. And this is primarily because of the government interference and the use of the sedition laws and the pressure on media outlets. The other thing that has happened in India is the media conglomerates like Reliance Industries and the Adani Group. They have started to buy out the medias, and they are influencing the editorial content and reducing the journalistic independence. And this, when gets tied up with their interest in the government, then we see there are strategic lawsuits against the journalist, physical attacks, online abuse, and violence, harassment. So we have a spiraling down journey in India as far as the journalism is concerned. To understand the power of journalism, I would like you to go back to 1983-84 to the city of Bhopal. So there is this journalist called Rajkumar Keswani, and he warned in advance about the safety lapses at Union Carbide plant in Bhopal. This only exemplifies the power of investigative journalism. He wrote an important article called Bhopal Sitting on a Volcano, and that exposed glaring safety violations that were subsequently ignored by the authorities. He wrote to the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh also, but then tragically, his warnings were unheeded. And what do we see as history? It culminated into 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy, one of the worst industrial disasters in history of mankind. Only if the warnings were taken seriously of this journalist, thousands of innocent lives would have been saved, and lakhs of lives which are still affected by the toxic gas would have been avoided. Lives would have been different. The history of Bhopal would have been drastically different to what it is today. So that is the power of good journalism, and we need to protect that. If we leave the country to poor journalism, to media houses, to Godi media, and we leave it to journalists who ask kindergarten standard questions to the Prime Minister of India, we are leaving corruption unchecked in the society. We are leaving society to polarization, divisions. We are only going to stunt the progress of this great country. We will only encourage poverty, inequality, and of course environmental degradation if we leave our country to poor journalism. Why aren't our journalists questioning the Prime Minister in a public press conference? It has been more than 11 years and the Prime Minister has not come into public to answer the press. Why aren't the journalists taking the courage to seek that press conference? We see that every time with the US President. We see that every time with the British Prime Minister and the French Prime Minister and the Japanese Prime Minister. Why is the Indian Prime Minister not talking to the journalist and journalist not questioning the Prime Minister of India in a public conference. And journalism is not just a profession. It's a lifeline of democracy. It's the heartbeat of a nation. The Indian freedom struggle was significantly shaped by the journalists like Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Mahatma Gandhi wrote in newspapers like Harijan and Young India magazine. Lala Lajpat Rai. Their publications disseminated nationalist ideas, mobilized public opinion, and provided the platform for leaders to voice dissent against British rule. They have used journalism as a method to the cause of freedom in India, independence of India, Siraj of India. And therefore, this is a precious part of Indian democracy. Journalism requires courage and dedication. It is very difficult to go through the hard work to highlight injustices and amplify marginalized voices, to hold power to account. Knowing all these facts, still, this vital profession, this vital institution, this vital practice of journalism faces existential threat in India. Censorship, violence, corporate influence, legal terrorism. Now that is undermining the ability to function freely and fearlessly. But then, to neglect journalism is to neglect the soul of democracy. Before it is too late, before we slip down from the democracy to authoritarian democracy, which gets out of control easily, it is time to introspect. It is time to look around our homes, mohallas, streets, cities, villages. There would be dozen problems, and evaluate how many newspapers, how many magazines, how many journalists have actually raised concerns about your local area. And that will define the depth of journalism in India, the depth of journalism that you and me are supporting in India. With that introspection, I leave you until next week. Thank you for your patient hearing and feedbacks. We do appreciate that. Bye for now.
You are listening to 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Broadcasting from the Dundrum Town Centre. This is Dublin South FM.